2024 meeting of the Oshkosh Common Council to order. If you could take the roll call, please.
Councilmember Esslinger.
Here.
Flom.
Here.
Bulow. Stevenson.
Here.
Nichols. Larson.
Here.
And Mayor Mugerhauer.
Here.
5 present.
I almost said aye, by the way.
Would have been okay.
It would have been okay. All right. If you'll all stand, I'll lead us in the pledge, and then we'll move on to a presentation. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome everyone this evening. Budget workshop with a public hearing as well. First off, we'll have a presentation by Finance Director Combs, and then we'll move into a public hearing, at which point, after that, we move into our workshop setting where council will then have some hopefully final deliberations and final direction to city staff and preparation for Tuesday's agenda and budget adoption. Finance Director, the floor is yours.
All right. I had a long talk with City Manager Roloff this morning. I did not prepare a presentation. We had the long discussion of, in the past, we've had a big presentation based off of the public hearing notice. After council workshops last week, the public hearing notice, there have been a ton of changes to it. So quite frankly, the presentation based off of the public hearing notice wouldn't have been very factual based off of the changes that were proposed by the council last week. I have everything available if we want to go over any of those changes. I sent an email to council last week, Friday, summarizing all the changes that were made from the budget workshops on Monday and Tuesday. So this is more of a time slot that you guys can ask me any questions. Otherwise, I can show anything that you would want me to go over further. But again, this was kind of a carryover that we've done a presentation in the past. I just didn't know if it would be completely factual based off of the changes that were made, so.
Okay. One of two options, I guess, at this point, then. We can either move right into the public hearing portion of this, and then council can do their question and answers after, as we normally would, if that's appropriate.
Yep.
Acceptable? Sounds good. So what we'll do is we'll just move right into public hearing, and then as needed, we can reference back to it, and then, of course, plenty of time for us to ask questions afterwards. So with that, I'll open the public hearing for 2025 City of Oshkosh budget that's operational and CIP. So if anyone's here registered to speak or would like to speak, you can come on up. I do have a couple people registered. I have Court Lakosh. I know a couple people had left as well. I also have Lee Faust. Those are the two that were registered in advance. If anyone else would like to speak to us regarding the 2025 budget, now's your chance. Come on up. Second time. Third and final. Speak now or forever hold your peace. 2025 budget. It's your opportunity to speak to us regarding anything in there in the capital improvement or operationals. Calling it 3 times. We'll consider the public hearing closed. We'll move into workshop. City Council, the floor is yours to ask any questions you want.
Mr. Mayor, we could do
Yep.
a little summary of what
If you'd like
we
to.
gave you guys to walk you through it, if that would be beneficial.
I hear some yeses.
That's sort of in lieu of the formal presentation, because I really appreciate, after looking at last week's work in retrospect, I think we were much more prepared than other times, because we had some time that we could spend getting some direction from the council. And I think what Ms. Kalm has put together hopefully reflects what direction you did provide. And then there's some unfinished business from last week as well. So I'm giving Julie enough time to call up all her screens so she can do that. Did I give you enough time?
I think so.
Okay, take it away, Julie.
So I think the spreadsheet that I emailed this afternoon, I also gave everyone a paper copy. This is one of the spreadsheets that Oshkosh has used in the past. The council and the finance department, they've kind of worked in tandem. I changed it slightly so that on the top of the screen, or on the top of the sheet, it starts with before enhancements. When we provided the initial proposed budget, we already included certain enhancements that had already kind of been directed by council to include. So I wanted to show what it would have been without any enhancements. Then you can see we added the 8 firefighters, paramedics, the police officer and social worker. And then that comes to that next, second, like, blue line where it says original proposed levy. That's that 48,902 tax levy that was in the public hearing notice. That was also how we started the budget workshops last week. Then, after the budget workshops, for the enhancements, we added the police sergeant, and we also increased the revenue for parking tickets. That was one of those offsetting items that we talked about. And we also added the park maintenance worker. Then there was direction from council to do some budget adjustments to get the tax levy down to that $8.12 tax rate. I also included in my email today that due to the assessed value of manufacturing, both that 845 tax rate that we were initially talking about and that 812 tax rate that we were talking about at the workshops, both changed by 2 cents because the assessed value for manufacturing decreased slightly. So it went from the same exact tax levy, but it went from $8.45 to $8.47, $8.12 to $8.14. And then, so that kind of gets us to that third blue line on the screen, if you can see it. I know it's small, I'm sorry. And that's kind of where we left the budget workshop. Based off of what I thought we had direction on, that's kind of where we left it. I had heard a couple council members mention maybe we want to revisit the enhancement with the 4 police officers. So I threw that in there just to show what kind of tax rate impact that would have. I thought I had heard a council member indicate that we should go back and talk about the 2 part-time clerical support for senior center. So I threw that in there, just mainly for discussion purposes based off of what feedback we thought we had heard. So I guess that was where I was thinking we could start, but really any document that I have provided, if you have questions on it, let me know and I can try to explain it further.
And maybe talk through maybe that number 4 that gets into the details of how we landed at the
Yeah, how the sausage was made a little bit. on that one.
$8.14. That's probably a good, accurate way of putting it. Thank you.
So we were trying to take into consideration the levy limit and worksheet and the levy limit restrictions that the city is under, as well as the expenditure restraint restrictions that we have, as well as council direction that we should use fund balance to lower the tax rate. So all those competing forces, if you want to word it that way, expenditure restraint, you're restricted every year on how much you can increase the general fund expenditures. With moving the ambulance costs out of the general fund into its own special revenue fund, for transparency purposes, when we work with the municipalities, that actually caused a little bit of a concern with expenditure restraint and that we didn't want to leave money on the table, which will hurt us in future years. So part of the proposal and part of the changes that we made after the council workshops was how do we not lose expenditure restraint potential in future years while also getting to the tax rate the council wanted to get to. So part of it is we put in there a contingency that would only be used if council directed staff to use it. We put in a higher tax rate for some of those special revenue funds to basically balance some of those budgets that we had talked about potentially.
Tax levy, not tax rate.
Yeah, sorry, tax levy.
I was gonna ask.
Yep, I'm sorry. Those were some of the special revenue funds that we had talked about during the workshop as potentially in the future needing a fund balance transfer from the general fund to their fund balance to basically get them whole, make them whole. So instead of doing a future budget adjustment to transfer fund balance from the general fund to those special revenue funds, I increased the tax levy in 2025 to basically make that transfer. It's basically coming from general fund balance, and it's going to end up in their fund balance, if that makes sense.
And that gets charged against our expenditure restraint formula, so there's an advantage to including that. And the mayor's heard my big statement always about keeping our powder dry. There was a great comment that we were asked at the workshop, have you ever considered a 2-year budget? The answer is no, but We always have at the same time. I can tell you that, one of the things that Ms. Calmus and I have found ourselves being very compatible in our few months together as finance director and city manager is we're constantly looking ahead to the following fiscal year and how the impact would be. And part of that is recognizing that, because of the expenditures we're adding to the budget, we have to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a position where we can't absorb those increases in the following year. Because then then we're just setting you up for failure, and we don't want to do that. So I think some of these things were done with 2026 in mind. So we're not budgeting 2 years, but we're always looking at the second year budget.
Councilmember Stevenson's got a question.
Yeah, I just, so clarifying point, we talked a little bit about that $8.47, whatever it was, at our council workshop, talked about how we had maybe a little bit of assessment kind of snafu go on, and then also residential property has just gone up in value quite a lot quicker than other commercial or industrial properties. So council kind of asked you, could we get it down to where it would look, where those would be a little bit more equalized? That's why we tasked you with getting to that $8.12. It's $8.14 now. So the way that I'm looking at this budget right now, that's a decrease of 3.1%. That's an accurate statement of our levy. We're looking at a decrease of the levy for 2025.
If you're comparing from 2023 to 2024 tax levies, it's actually a decrease of negative 1.18% decrease.
Sure, that one. Okay, sure.
That 3% decrease is comparing it to the original proposed levy.
Okay, sure.
So, sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
No, you're good.
And that's why we put both in, so that we
Yeah.
could, clarify those types of things.
But yeah, it's the bottom square underneath the big chart.
Sure. I guess the point I wanted to cross, it's a decrease.
It's a
When we
decrease in the
started off-
tax levy
we
from
started
last
off
year.
At a 3% increase.
And just to repeat, and I'm only repeating what I think we believe council's direction was that you wanted the impact to be only about what was originally the 2.83% levy increase. You didn't want the residential to get more impact because we knew that impact was, so we're essentially eliminating the impact of the reval swing that was going to shift it. Doesn't matter, we're still going to be at risk for future years, but it would soften the blow that residents were going to feel this year. And I think that's what the direction from the council was, so that's what we were trying to do.
Exactly. And then I guess follow-up question, I know we also then talked about, I think you touched on it a little bit, but we talked about the implications of potentially making a budget deficit going into 2026. Do you guys feel comfortable with 2026? I mean, what we're doing right now is, Julie's got a smirk on her face.
Right now, if we go to the proposed changes after council budget workshop, there is a $5.3 million miscellaneous revenue, which is basically fund balance drawdown. With doing it the way that we did it, we can assume the actual fund balance drawdown is going to be closer to $3.5 million. I eliminated the vacancy savings that I would normally put in there. That contingency that council would have to direct staff to use, otherwise that would go right back to fund balance. But it's still a $3.5 million projected drawdown of fund balance. So finance directors are never completely,
They're never happy. That's what you wanted to say.
I mean, drawdown of fund balance will always make you a little bit uneasy, especially when you can't say specifically there's $3.5 million of one-time expenses that we're drawing it down for.
Sure.
Some of that's got to be operating.
And I expressed my misgivings last week as well, but I've made my point, and council heard me, so I'll stand by those words and not belabor them.
Councilmember Flom.
Just to kind of follow up on Councilmember Stevenson's question, just a point that I have, our general fund undesignated fund balance after the $3.5 million drawdown is still in a pretty healthy place, if I'm correct.
Correct.
So when we go to Moody's, when we do our creditors, when we talk to our creditors and when we do our borrowing, we're still in a pretty competitive spot. So it's not like we are at risk of emptying our entire rainy day fund here and leaving us in a vulnerable position in the future. We're not.
Right. It's still in a decent position. It's just something that will have to be discussed during the 2026 budget and how we're not going to have to keep needing to keep drawing it down. It's just a vicious cycle to get yourself into that we got to figure out how to do the 2026, hopefully without further drawing it down.
And sorry, I don't mean to, did you, and that's where I guess my question kind of came at. Do you guys, in 2026, are we feeling like we won't become like addicted to fund balance? I mean, do we?
You will have to take a look at what your levy is in 2026, because that will be a concern, because
Sure.
because you're not taxing for it, you're going to have to either continue to use fund balance or use levy, or a combination of the two. That's what's going to happen.
Sure.
And that's the danger of adding so many expenditures at one time, that you, and some of this is only funded for half a year, but, Julie's done some things to minimize that. That's why she got it down to 3.5 million.
Coming out of last week's budget workshop, I thought council gave some pretty clear direction. I appreciate staff following that direction very well. I myself, I'm not overly excited about what we're doing in drawing down the fund balance to do this. I respect and appreciate why my fellow council members want to do that. I worry about 26's budget, and I say that with, I think I said it last week. The proposed 2.89 or 2.9-ish% levy increase was extremely responsible, as a reasonable number to fund the services that we provide. But I also appreciate that the impact of some of the decisions that were made previously and what it's having on the taxpayers and for the tax bill that'll be going out here shortly. So I get that. I don't like what we're doing here, but I'm glad that consensus was built and that there was an agreement that relief was needed. And I'm comfortable going forward with where we're at currently. Taking on additional or trying to use additional levy would be a hard pass for me. So adding more to this would make this too top-heavy for me and definitely put me into a spot where I wouldn't be, interested in moving forward with that as an option. Mr. Larson, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to echo a lot of the same, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the sentiment, all the conversations last week. I don't expect anybody to watch 16 hours of that, but it was worth doing it. It was an enjoyable experience to work with you guys getting there. And I understand all the fears. I'm looking at this as, we're all going to say hopefully a one-time thing. It is a use even in our fund balance policy. It's spelled out from when this was written in 2020, I think it was, that a one-time use for tax relief in extraneous circumstances is a good use for that fund anyway. Do we know after this, just to put some ease in this, what percentage of that, we were talking about at one point this being at 37% where it needed to be at 30, where do we wind up? Presume the middle ground at 3.5, where does that put us? 20-something still?
So at the council workshops, we talked about, we had a spreadsheet that I showed. I'm trying to get it up on the screen, but basically I had shown that I would like to bring the fund balance policy to long-range finance to revise it slightly. If you look at just the general fund, we would be at about 26.85% after these changes. As I discussed, I feel like that fund balance policy, I would like to make it to look a little bit more all-inclusive, because we do have so many special revenue funds that completely rely on the general fund for support. So if something were to happen with those special revenue funds, it would need the general fund to bail it out. So I would like to make that fund balance policy a little bit more holistic, look at the full true big picture. And even at that point, looking at the big picture, we would be at about 16.96%, so about 17%, so not horrible. The tax levy adjustment that I was talking about for some of those special revenue funds, that fixed some of the negative fund balances that I had shown at the council workshop. So now the only one that would still be in the negative fund balance that I am expecting to have to come to council and ask for that transfer probably in 2025 is the internal service fund. So, but that being said, it's not as rosy of a picture, but even looking at the huge big picture, which our fund balance does not require us to do, we would still have a healthy fund balance.
And I'm all for, like I said last week, getting this into a more comprehensive policy going forward, because you're not wrong. It should be that way already, and that'll help making these decisions going forward. But I'm really comfortable with where we wound up. I think it's a great use of some funds that, as Paul pointed out many times last week, those are taxes we already collected. This is a good use for them to provide one-time relief. And I'm very thankful. I know I told you in emails, but I'm very thankful that you took the direction and made that work in a manner that you are at least comfortable with. So thank you again for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Is Chief Stanley here? Chief, could you come up, please? Thank you. I want to talk regarding the extra ambulance, getting the extra ambulance, Chief. We're Oshkosh Common Council members. We care about everyone. Our first regard is for citizens of Oshkosh. And maybe you can give us all an update on where are we at on this contractual obligations with the towns. At this point in time, are we bound to do this now with the extra ambulance or not?
Yes, so the townships had the option to opt out by October 1st. None of them chose to exercise that option, so they are all contractually bound to stay in that agreement with us for at least another year, as are we to provide that service for another year. Then we would potentially be in the same scenario next year of, the mutual opt-out is by October 1st of each year. And then the life of that agreement terminates at midnight, December 31st, 2026. So we would need to either choose to or not to negotiate a successor agreement mutually sometime in 26 to take place when that existing agreement terms out at the end of the year.
So in essence, where you've started going down this road and this vehicle is going to have to be purchased. So, this isn't something we can say, well, we're not going to do this now. I suppose we can do it, but then we're really going to get zapped because then we're going to fund it by ourselves. If we don't, but we have to do this contract, right?
Right, we have to provide the service. So, like I said, until through 2025. Council at any point, now or most likely in the future, depending on what the successor agreement looks like, can opt out by giving notice October 1st for the following January.
Wouldn't it have been, spitballing here, wouldn't it have been better to negotiate contracts longer than that?
Longer than the 5 years?
Well, an opt-out in 1 year? They can opt out in 1 year? Did I hear that correctly or no?
Yeah, the way the contract reads, and fortunately, City Attorney Lawrenson isn't here, either party, so the City of Oshkosh can opt out, or any of the individual townships or villages or cities can say, we no longer want the service to participate in this agreement in the following year. We said that may be something we look at in a successor agreement, in any variety of things the council has identified in our workshops and closed sessions about desires for future agreements. But, that's the existing agreement.
So the terms are considered a 5-year agreement?
I think it's more like a 7 or 8 year agreement.
No, sir.
When do we renew it?
We renewed it
Was it
in
21?
22, 23, 24, 25, 26, so
Yeah.
22.
So it was a I stand corrected, it was a 5-year agreement. But everybody has a 1 year, annually by October 1, you let us know whether you're in or out for the following year, so we can plan accordingly. We're not under, it's entirely up to our discretion on how we provide that service. So and they'll get charged accordingly, and so with the addition of the 4th ambulance, they'll be charged with a 4th EMS unit being assumed in there. We haven't ordered the vehicle yet, correct?
No.
So we're still waiting, so we haven't ordered the vehicle yet, but once the council adopts the budget, then we would start the process of ordering a 4th EMS unit. We're going to use one of our reserves, or basically take one of our frontline ones. Normally, when it gets pushed to the first line of reserves, we'll keep the best one of the bunch on the front line for the 4th unit.
Yeah, so to
Until the new one
dovetail
arrives.
from what the city manager is saying, we would order a unit into our replacement cycle in 2027 because it's a 3-year wait list for the production of the ambulance. So we already have 3 in production for 27. We would add a 4th into production for 27.
Okay. Thanks.
Staff, department head levels are here. If you have any further questions, council as well, they're all prepared to talk about anything and everything that resides in their budgets.
So I'd like be happy just to give you a running scorecard, so to speak, of where we are. If you take a look, the lowest blue line, that's where we are today, just a shade under 814 with a levy of exactly 47 million. There are 2 enhancements that we felt were still in play for your consideration, and that one was for the police department at a net cost of $455,200. A increase in the rate from 813, adding just under 8 cents to about 821, almost 822. The other one was the senior center, the 2 part-time clerical support would add about 1/3 of a penny. So depending if you take one or both, but the mayor's used to us having this running total so that we can, if you take one and not the other, we can give you all those scenarios so that we give you that. But if you took both of them, you would knock it up to just a shade over $8.22.
I guess I'm, I'm fine not including those 2 things. I think, Mayor McGraw, you kind of indicated your feelings on that as well.
Definitely not interested in advancing any more cash on hand to pay for them, that's for sure. But also adding this many full-time is like swallowing a grand piano, and government doesn't do that well. Nobody does. It's going to be tough to budget in '26. I have concerns about adding any more this year because I think setting the stage for next year, there will be 0 full-time employees added next year in my estimation, unfortunately, because we are going to absorb more than we could swallow this year. So I'm disappointed in my own right. I think the police officers are needed. I think there are crimes going uninvestigated, and it would be a great benefit to the community. And it pains me to say I can't fund that. But into the future, we may have to talk about, it was actually for the first time in my recollection brought up that, we may need to talk about a public safety referendum in the future. Whether that's 25, 26, 27, somewhere in the future, to continue investing in those things, that may need to be a thing the future council needs to talk about. Councilmember Flom, I think you wanted to go.
And this one is for Chief Stanley, and it's regard to his capital budget. In regards to the Fire Training Center, which is on the slate for the 2025 CIP, then the PD training facility, which is on the CIP scheduled for 2029, it's not really sitting well in regards to operating jointly, having a dual facility. I don't know if that was explored or not. But it is a concern that I have that we're going to do 2 training facilities about 5 years apart, and we can do one in 2027 or 2028. And I know that these are just, an idea that I had was, moving the police item back, pushing the fire item up to 2027 and doing a joint facility. Has that been potentially workshopped or not?
We've had some initial discussions relative to that site, and that footprint was not large enough to do a joint public safety training center.
Okay.
And certainly can understand council's concern around, should we do, 2 separate facilities or 1 large facility? That's, thing to consider is, while yes, we are both public safety training, both public safety agencies that need training centers, those needs look very differently. A shooting range versus a burn building, a driving track, versus a rappelling tower. So, while I understand council's concerns, that there has been a tremendous amount of workshops and thought process into the development of this training center, and it's very discouraging for me that, we have a shovel-ready project that the city has already, and city staff have already made a tremendous investment in, to a fire training center that we've never had in 165 years and has been in the CIP and pushed since 1995, that we are this close and we're going to shelve that. You know, that's very disconcerting, discouraging. It is an ideal location for us, that there was a lot of malice of forethought of its proximity to the central garage. You know, also malice of forethought of its central location within the city, you know, with its ability to serve as an EOC, as an emergency fire station. So to throw the baby out with the bathwater is, you know, very disheartening for me. And I understand council has many important decisions to make, but this has been you know, we've already invested in an architectural and engineering study. We've invested in the infrastructure there, put concrete there, put a training tower out there, over $500,000 into the design work. You know, now we're going to take that and just throw it out. You know, that's while, you know, I appreciate the concern around our need for fire stations and identifying that, you know, we have no location for Station 16, no infrastructure for Station 16, no design work for Station 16. So, you know, I would view this as, this is just getting shoved down the road further and not becoming a reality.
Well, and it's not that I don't recognize the need, I absolutely do. I know we haven't had a fire training center in the city, but that's just a concern that I felt the need to voice. So I know that it's a shovel-ready project, just felt like putting that out there. It's not so much that I would absolutely oppose it, it's just more of kind of, you know, throughout the decisions that council has to make, one that I'm not necessarily, I just wish there was a little bit more of a potential design for a joint facility, but I understand that there are differing needs between the police department and the fire department. So I guess it's just more of a concern and not so much an existential crisis for me, but thank you.
Sure, understood. Thank you, sir.
Chief, if you don't mind, I'm just going to piggyback as long as you're up here. So I'm the one that floated the idea. I got to take ownership of that from last week. And I haven't been a big fan of the location since its inception, quite honestly. But my concern, most of my concern comes with, this is a huge dollar amount at a time where we know we have extensive facility needs for existing facilities we already have. And if this was another department asking for something, I've got a couple of things in the future budgets. If I'm still sitting up here, I'll be bringing those up too, that taking care of what we have before adding new is something we need to continue concentrating on. This started, you know, back in 2020, this started as at least numbers-wise, $2.5 million project. And then it was into the high threes, and then it was 5.5-ish, and now it's 7.7. And to me, the scope of the project, from my understanding, hasn't changed much. It's always, the idea was an EOC, it was a fire training center, it was a centralized shop for all the firehouses. But to my understanding, the scope hasn't changed, but yet the costs have ballooned significantly. So was something missed on the front end that we just didn't know about, that it should have just been a higher dollar amount at the beginning?
Absolutely.
It's a question I have.
Yeah, that's, you know, obviously, the rising costs of construction have escalated that exponentially. That, you know, nothing's gotten cheaper, and all the different city projects you're referencing, we're seeing higher costs. But as far as, was it accurately predicted in the initial stages? No. You know, that one of the things that was misleading is we got a quote from a project management, you know, construction company that did not understand the scope and complexity of the project. And just basically, without having any discussion with the fire department, just kind of gave a shoot from the hip, this is what I think it would cost you to update that building. You know, and that's why we went through the design work to say, okay, what is this really going to cost, you know, to get this done? So, you know, until you take that, you know, and you're experiencing that with all of the different projects you're looking at, of everything's a ballpark estimate until you pay the money to have somebody take a deep dive and look at it. You know, so the number on the front end, you know, in my opinion, and, you know, what we've seen from some of the product, is too low.
Okay. And I don't know if Mr. Urban's back there or not, but you should, what's the square footage on this site? For the building itself, the footprint of the building? Like, how much square footage are we looking at here?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't answer that off the top of my head.
I should have asked in advance, that's on me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for that. I shouldn't have asked. Okay. I'm gonna hold any more comments for now. I think, was it Julie or Mark? Sorry,
That's
I
me.
didn't know who pushed over there.
That's right. I just wanted to bring up the slide. Based off of direction from the budget workshops, I did temporarily, or for discussion purposes, we did move the fire training center from 2025 to 2026. And I thought the consensus was to move Station 16 up from, I don't remember which year it was in, but we moved that to 2025 and 2026. It had been split between 2 years. So that is up for discussion. I thought that was council direction, but I wanted to point out that I do have those tentatively in there.
And I like the idea, but the chief's point, if we don't have the ability to put a shovel in the ground for a Station 16 in 2025, we've now wasted some debt capacity within 25 that could have been used to advance another project. And I know, I apologize, you weren't here for some of the discussions, Chief, but, you know, we've got a certain amount of debt, and we know that the fire training centers the fire stations are important, and those are going to be needed, and probably back to back to back, and to do that, it's going to be difficult as well. So one was, advancing one of those projects.
Yeah, certainly, or do we, you previously referenced a referendum, is that how we attack the needs of the fire stations, to that back-to-back format, or the needs of more city facilities? I think all that bears out. But at this time, we have no location for a new Station 16. So, not only are we not shovel-ready, we don't know where the shovel goes. The computer will tell me, but that's the struggle, is finding property. So we've got a couple of potential sites that we, have identified, but, far from secure. So, we're looking at best case scenario, 2 years, more likely 3 to 4 for Station 16.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, just to point out, because with the changes that Julie highlighted, we're probably at just about 18.6 million for general obligation borrowing with all the assumptions that Julie just gave you. And then, and this is where you have to take the long gulp, it's over 36 million for 2026. So you average those two out, you're at about 27 million. So keep that in mind, and that's why we owe you, I believe it's by May, the full-blown facility study, because you've got to know how big this is. So, it seems low for 25, but we're sort of holding back so we know the full totality of what you're going to be looking at. And then, as Julie and I were listening to the chief, the practical reality of what he talked, logistical reality, what he talked about, one of the other things we could do is we could perhaps move up the Station 15 improvements. The idea is we got to get moving on some fire department improvements, because if we keep putting all of them off, we're just setting ourselves up for a pig in a python situation, and we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. So, and I think the gist of what council was concerned about there. Like, we may have some hesitancy about the fire training facility, so put it to 26. But let's get something into 25, so.
Can we advance something else that we know? That's.
In the end, the short answer is yes, you guys, you do have that flexibility, and obviously, this is not a rehearsed discussion, we're kind of talking about this, and I'm not sure where the chief is. I know the chief feels very strongly about the training center, and I think you can tell that. But in terms of the practical reality of 16, we've talked about, where is it going, and we've done all the heat maps, and it still doesn't give us the magic location. We've got a couple in mind, but we don't have it locked up yet. Is 15, since 15's not going anywhere, could we move that up and do the 15 improvements as just one option?
So before I go to Councilmember Wrestling and then Flo, just to wrap up my thoughts on the training center, I do want to be clear. I thought I was last week. I didn't hear a single council member say, stop the training center and don't ever do it. I don't believe I heard anyone say that. I was really deliberate on using the word pause, just with some of the concerns, some of the commentary that was spoken during that budget workshop. I like the idea of housing and having that, within the confines of the city of Oshkosh. I also have to look at the next 5 to 10 years. That's our job, is to look at the whole board and make the best call possible for the citizens as well as our operations. And if that means pausing briefly while we get more information for a potential combined site, I think that's reasonable. I understand, I make that decision with full knowing that that's potential, the cost will continue to go up. Anything we push off, it will cost more. It doesn't matter what it is in 26 and 7, it's gonna cost more. I know that. And I feel confident council understands that, the ramifications of that as well, but I just want to be really clear. I want to make sure I'm saying it to you directly that it's not a no, it's just we have to pump the brakes, in my opinion. So, Councilmember Esslinger, followed by Councilmember Flom.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I think you and the police chief have made it crystal clear that you struggle sometimes with hiring employees. And I know with the police chief, we authorized some of the officers to be able to use the police vehicles on their personal time because it's a little benefit that maybe another community doesn't offer. And so, with this training facility, clearly, a better trained staff is, may save a life easier or may save a life. And so, but as far as the staff goes, if we had this facility, is this something that you can tout where, if I wanted to be, God forbid, a firefighter, I could never do that job. But if I'm looking at Oshkosh or Fond du Lac or whatever city, and, I'm a young guy and I want to do well in my career, and I know that Oshkosh has this facility, and the other one that I'm looking at does not. Number one, does it sound reasonable that I would use that as a reason for me to come to the city of Oshkosh because they have that? And number two,
Absolutely.
Does that help us in any way, shape, or form with any of your professional organizations that you're associated with, of getting any awards or any other thing that, we can use to tout and help us not only retain maybe, or recruit excellent candidates? I mean, is this facility something that could potentially be an advantage in that fashion?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. That as we wage the war for talent, that I can join the Appleton Fire Department and have right in my backyard a world-class training facility with Fox Valley Tech, multi-million-dollar facility. Right to the south of us is Fond du Lac that has, within the last several years built a brand-new training facility. Or I can go to Oshkosh where we try to find a vacant parking lot, or, hey, cram that into the back of Station 15 where everything else already is. So for the recruitment of the initial candidate to go through a fire academy, absolutely. Right now, we're sending our recruits to an aged facility in Neenah, Menasha to do a joint recruit academy that they're getting ready to sink another $500,000 into to upgrade it. So, is it a black eye for us to have never had a training center and still don't have a training center? Absolutely. And then again, for retention, when we say we want you to meet all these training standards, we want you to meet all these competencies, the ever-expanding list of competencies that they need to have, we don't have a place to train. That we don't have a place to store our reserve vehicles, we don't have office space for our training staff. That absolutely makes recruitment retention more challenging. And then, relative to awards or different things, not so much awards, but being able to maintain our training standards for our ISO rating. Right now, the city of Oshkosh enjoys a 1 out of 10, which is the highest ISO rating that you can achieve. We're one of only 8 departments in the state that has that, but a lot of that is tied to training hours. And we struggle to meet those hours for lack of a facility. Our 2% dues, where we get a large source of revenue from the state of Wisconsin, where you have to demonstrate training hours and training competencies. We struggle with that to prove that we're able to meet those training competencies for lack of a training center. So, not only is it a distinction thing, it could have economic impact as well for the city and for business owners and property owners in the city.
Okay. Well, council, just, I guess, for discussion purpose, or just my opinion, one thing I always struggle with is when we have police and fire, these are the 2 things that literally save lives and help us out in the community. So, again, I'm going to say it again, if the chief, either one of them, says that this is needed, quite frankly, I think it's long overdue. And with the explanation you just gave there, I think this is something that needs to go forward. It needs to go forward now. I don't know, we have latitude on how we do that, and I'm up for discussion on that, but just my opinion is I think we need this, it's overdue, and we need to move forward now. Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I think Julie wanted to say something first, if we don't mind, and then we'll come back to you.
Sorry, I was trying to look at the 10-year CIP just based off of some of the comments the mayor mentioned about the facilities we have, maintaining the facilities that we had. I know we've had a lot of conversation between facilities, the fire department, finance that in on some of those, and there was a lot of discussions about how there's also a lot of needs in the fire stations. The fire chief said his main priority was the training center, but every single station has renovations and improvements that are needed. So you may not see it in the 5-year CIP, so I wanted to mention it, just because we had to try to balance out the CIP, so much to the fire chief's dismay, we had to push some of those other renovations out in order to prioritize the training center. But Fire Station 17 renovations is in 2031 for $3 million. 18 is in the CIP for 2032 for $3.2 million. Fire Station 19 is in the CIP for 2033 for $3.4 million. And that was due to the inflation. I think we tried sneaking Fire Station 15 in the 2026 that you'll see on the CIP document, but all the other ones got pushed out past that 5-year mark, so you can't see them. I wanted to comment on that in case the thought process was to move any of those renovations up during this discussion. Full disclosure, I wanted to make sure you were aware that they're all in that 10-year CIP. We were trying to stagger out the facility needs.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And they're all needed now. It's just that financially speaking, we had to spread them out. So you could interchangeably move them, and I would certainly seek chief's input on that before you do anything. Councilmember Hesslinger suggested something different. It's all in play for you guys, and I wanted to give you those bigger numbers, the 18 million and the nearly 27 million or 26, so you could put them all together, 36 million. So you could factor it all as going through your head. But with that said, the idea is to give us direction tonight, so that next Tuesday we're in a as close to a delivery package as we can. It's not as urgent for the CIP, because basically what you're saying is when you borrow next year, this is what we'd like you to do. You could do the budget next week, and honestly, you could put this off for another meeting or two. It's not going to be the end of the world, because we're not urgently going to be doing that right away.
Yeah, so in the past, do you mind? You're supposed to go. In the past, and you're doing it in the operations side, which we don't normally do too heavy on. In the past, we've put a contingency in our CIP, and there is one, but usually it's modest. In this case, one option is to build a contingency in just in advance, and then it's just a budget adjustment later in terms of what you're using your contingency for. And if you don't use it, you don't use it. And so what you're saying is, while we can do that in the future, we could also just do that too and say.
That's exactly what I meant. I just didn't articulate it as well as you just did.
We could earmark a contingency of X amount of dollars, and then what it's used for, we can continue hashing out. It's an option.
Yeah.
Councilmember Stevenson, floor is yours.
Yeah, I guess we were talking a little bit about the training center and as like a recruitment or like quality of life for our employees type of thing. Is a training center more important to our employees than like a improved fire station? Which of those, like in a working environment, I'm not a firefighter, if I was a firefighter, would I stay in Oshkosh or want to be in this work environment because I have a training facility or because I have a fire station they're all relatively old, the ones we're looking at that's been updated? I guess that's my weight.
Yeah, absolutely. So and just to kind of back up to some of the things that the city manager was talking about as well. All the stations are aged. They all need either rebuilt or renovated. We've had some of these discussions before, and our facility study that we had the architect and consulting company do said, industry standard, 50-year lifetime for a fire station, 25 years, reprogram it, keep the envelope, reprogram it. So we're at that 25 to 50-year window on all of our stations. As are we still in need of the training center, and then, that's the fire department. Obviously we're sensitive, I'm sensitive to the idea of City Hall is old and inadequate, so is any number of other city facilities. That's, how do we, move that around on the chessboard, right? And to balance the budget, and that's obviously the challenge of council. Now, to do a value proposition of, will a firefighter be happier with a training center or with a station? Well, if you're assigned to Station 16, you'd probably rather have Station 16.
Sure.
But, if you're assigned to Station 35, it's not going to make you probably that happy. So one of the things we looked at in our prioritization is this will impact all of the staff. Because, and you talked about quality of life. One of the things that's going to be in there is a much improved fitness facility. So that rather than working out next to the hot water heater and the furnace, keeping your head ducked so you don't hit it on a pipe on the stair climber, that they have some improved fitness facilities. So how can we improve their quality of life? And then, like I said, I keep coming back to, while the priorities are many, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, we're at square zero, on design work, any concept, anything. That's, I think that the challenge and the concern that I have is, as we go from budgetary year to budgetary year and council members to council members, if we keep moving those chess pieces around and reprioritizing, we're going to do lots of design work. And we're going to invest a lot of money in design work on top of what we've already invested. We're going to probably going to then continue to do more and more facility studies at, $50,000 to $100,000 at a shot. We need to do a project. That we've got to pull the Band-Aid off and do one. And I certainly am not giving council direction on what I think you should do. That's up to you. But from my perspective, so we've gone through 6 years of planning to get to this point, and concerted effort. Let's get a project done.
Yeah, and thank you for the explanation. I also just want to reiterate, I think we're all aware the fire department needs some love. I think our facilities, I'm very committed to wanting to make sure all of our facilities are updated. I know I'd love to be able to borrow $7 million and get more staffing, but that's not exactly a good thing to do financially. But so I guess my roundabout answers, it maybe appears that we're asking you some hard questions, but thank you for being here. And I think we all know that the fire department needs a little attention here and there. So.
Councilmember Floam, followed by Mr. Larson.
Thank you. And Chief, I think the core point of this is that when we talk about budgeting, we talk about facilities. I mean, the needs are infinite. We have finite resources, and priorities are contested all the time. Knowing that you're not ready for Station 16, you don't have a site selection, you don't have design study done, yet, in the most recent draft of the budget, we put in those resources there. Do you have any stations, and this is a question I should have asked you previously, so I apologize for this. Do you have any stations that you could feel confident in saying, all right, I have a site where I know I can go here now and start building? My guess to that answer is probably not. So considering that, I'll just double check with you, and I apologize, this is something I should have asked you earlier, probably offline.
No worries. As for an alternate location, no. If we wanted to, for example, what we call the triplets of 17, 18, 19 that were all built at the same time. If we wanted to gut those, renovate those, they're not going to move necessarily. They'll probably stay on that same parcel.
Right.
For the intent of the facility study was to get another 25 years of life out of them. So we could look at that, still need to do design work, to what that looks like and what that costs and, what infrastructure needs to change, from when they were built, does it need a different sewer lateral, things like that, are a more in-depth discussion. But to relocate anything, we're looking through the real estate ads.
Right, and just to reiterate, when that facility study comes back next year, it's probably going to have close to $100 million price tag on it. And knowing the needs of the fire department, we have to do something. So to Councilmember Stevenson's point, I'm sure all of us here, I don't want to speak for all of us, know that we have to do something with this. So in regards to the questions that I had about the training center itself, I do have concerns about the price tag, but they were more logistical. I don't oppose the concept. I don't. I may have some concerns about the location and the price tag, but knowing the needs of the fire department, we need to get started on something here, or else the costs are going to continue to pile up down the line. So whether or not council creates a contingency fund and leaves it open to interpretation of what project we're going to do versus doing a training center, that'll be up for discussion that we'll come to a consensus on at some point, but we need to do something.
Agreed.
Floor is yours.
Sure. Chief, I'm just thinking back, the first time you gave a presentation to us, I followed up with you when I first met you, which was great, and asked you some of these same questions, I'm sure you recall. And we're revisiting it now, and there's no better answers, but I wasn't questioning the training center. My chagrin is with the CIP process, and I know you share some of that, right? Because we put things in there, and then you don't get them until it's your time, and then people question them, and they got to go back in time, and you got to wait for them again. And that's not fair, it's not. That's not what anybody's saying here at all, I don't think. I'm certainly not. I see the value in all of it, but my point to you then was, when I toured the fire station, I meet people who work there, and I looked at the building, there's a dire need for that. And my question to you then was, can we do that first? And you said, it's not how it works. And I'm learning that that's not how it works, and that's okay. But given all that, knowing that we have a little bit of time to talk about it still, I'd love to take a little bit of time to talk about it, because I'm certainly not a no. I understand the value of it. I understand everything you're saying, and you're right in asking for it. And we want to make sure that you get the right things. But I want to make sure that we make the decision. I made the point last week, again, not that you watched 16 hours of video of us talking about it, but it would have been an easier decision for me personally if I had known that there was going to be a police training and a fire that were on the literal same page. That's where I all went, maybe they go together. But they've never been on the same page until right now. So that makes it a little hard for us. So my preference is take a minimal amount of time and talk about this further if we can.
Understood.
If preference to continue doing that tonight, or to put this into a contingency fund and move it to a future meeting? Just so I have some consensus on.
Given the fact that the training center was moved to 26, the concern that I have is that Chief walks away with nothing.
So here's, I shouldn't cut you off, I apologize. Keep going.
If we do create a contingency, I would like to see some sort of commitment from council that we are going to revisit this in the new year. And do something.
So before I cut you off, that's actually where I was going to go with, if we, if council did something along the lines of creating that contingency, and basically priority one is assessing fire department needs. And would be a crystal clear message from this body to staff and how to move forward. And in the end, as city manager pointed out, everything comes back to us for another approval anyways. This is the first of a few approvals. It'll be debt.
This is
it'll
the
be-
appropriation, not
Yep,
the authorization.
It'll be the debt, it'll be the actual construction related, those types of things. So at any point, we can always, we can raise a red flag if somebody's doing something we didn't want. If council deems that appropriate to throw this into a contingency with fire being priority one. And as we talked about at the budget, we've got a few things that our facility folks, Mr. Urban, that falls under administration, we leave it to them to make the determination on what's best. Sometimes when we start talking about what we think is best for a space, we start picking winners and losers a little bit too much, All right, well, how's 16 over 17 or 17 over 18, right? They all need it, but I don't know the ins and outs of it, but we do have professionals on staff that do. So maybe we allow them to make a secondary recommendation to us in the future that we can consider the use of those funds then. Is that,
Yeah, I mean, Diane set me up with a whole bunch of roll call vote forms, so you can do that.
we don't have to do this in vote form. This is not how we did any of the
Yeah,
budget workshops even
I'm prepared to do
before.
it however you want. and-
But I just want to make sure that we're giving crystal clear direction tonight and that there is consensus. If there's not, then yeah, we're going to move to some votes, but.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing you say, and again, whether it's a vote or consensus amongst the five of you, because with only five of you, you could have a different consensus next week, but we could put under facilities, fire department facility contingency, so that it's specific to fire department, not anybody, that it's like you have the intent of doing something and buys you time to, Chief heard all those things?
Yep.
He can take that back into consideration.
And it maintains our position that this was a pause on that project temporarily. So that if things shake out in the right way, then we start moving forward still in 25 with a training center. Maybe we're told that it's just not a viable option by people who are very professional in that space, and we listen and we move forward. And that way we're not putting a cart before the horse and saying, well, you have to go do a firehouse, and then all of a sudden it comes back, well, we could have done it. Council okay with that concept?
Is there a time frame on it?
I would like to see a timeframe on it if possible.
Just so we're not making that decision next June?
Oh, so that it comes back to council in a set amount of
Yeah,
time?
I mean, I'd like, for the sake of chief and for the sake of his department, because there were funds allocated, now that aspect is changing.
My only thing would be, we have the complete facility study that's due back to us in May,
Yeah.
as well as several of us floated the idea, or at least want to know more about a joint facility. And that's not something that they're going to be able to turn around in a short amount of time. But if this gets put on, now I know the city manager is short on time with his outstanding issues, but if it gets put on the outstanding issues under the city manager's portion of the agenda, it stays on there, and we get to keep poking and prodding on the topic. Is that sufficient enough to make sure that it stays in front of staff and us regularly?
Chief?
Yeah, if I may offer a couple things to that, to mayor and council, we're still under contract, and still in the project to finish the design work. So that all still needs to happen. We're to the point of the, planning, approving plans, and, finalizing all the details. So regardless of what we decide to do moving forward, we need to finish that process. So we've already paid for it, we have the agreement, so we can have it ready for whatever length of time that pause is. So, we'll continue doing that rather than just say, okay, we'll stop the presses, we're not going to, do any more planning. We need to finish the life of that project, right? Then, we've talked about the comprehensive facility study, but, the fire department at council's direction did a fire department facility study. The same architectural firm, Short Elliott and Hendrickson, that did that study is who's doing the project, the design work for the training center. So we can provide that initial study that kind of maps out, because that was prior to most of you being on the council, I believe, when we had that workshop, so I can provide that to you again, that shows some of that progression and how they prioritize stations, so you can see that. And I'm sure that, either in a workshop or a council meeting or just, individual phone calls, that the architect would be more than happy to help walk through some of those recommendations, the whys, the whats, what it would look like, what a joint training center might look like, things like that, and be a resource to council as well.
I guess if you're comfortable with this, knowing the fact that as the CIP currently stands, we're appropriating money for a station that you're not ready to build, you don't have a site selected for. If you're comfortable with this, I'm comfortable with this because the last thing that I know anything about is fire facilities. So if you're okay with us creating a contingency and moving forward in a direction where we can identify the biggest possible needs, which in your mind is the training center, I believe it is as well. But just double checking it one more time, and we're not shelving the project, we're just pausing it. If you're comfortable with that, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I greatly appreciate council's commitment to the department and recognition of the needs, that we need to do something. So am I going to turn down the contingency and say, nope, you either tell me right now it's the training center or not? Absolutely not. Like you've all identified, the needs of the department are many. How do we successfully start moving forward to address some of those needs, and creating a plan for that? Absolutely. But that's a strong acknowledgement from council, to the department that you recognize those needs and are committed to help improving the life of the firefighters, helping to improve our, abilities to recruit, retain, all of those things. That's a very positive message. We can put together, again, the stuff that's already been done, get that to you, like I said, as we wrap up this project with the training center, and we can, that facility study is a couple years old. I can ask the architect to freshen up those numbers as well of what would those renovations look like? What would those relocations look like cost-wise, so you can see today's dollar type of estimates as well, so that you're better equipped to make that decision. So the fact that you're willing to continue having dialogue is very encouraging. Like I said, we can continue to pull information and share information, that you may need to help into that decision-making of what is going to be that project. But the fact that we're going to do a project, I'll take that.
Okay. If you could use your mic, they can't hear you in the back. Councilmember Stevenson.
Yeah, I don't think I need a timeline today. I think maybe we'll get some of that information to us. I think I would like a timeline in the future. My worry, I like associating with the facility study, but my worry associated with it, knowing it's going in May, is, you have to design, you have to go out to build. That stuff alone is going to probably take half a year. And then the actual build time, I worry that we won't get a project for fire in 2025. And I want to commit to getting a project for you guys. So I would say let's put a pin in it now, get some more information, and we'll hear probably more next week, couple weeks, whatever.
I think I share that concern. The fire department needs, like so many of our other facility needs, are so massive. To just wait until May, I think that's, yeah.
And if I at all inferred that wasn't my full position on that.
That's what I was saying too. So
But,
you're good.
Yeah.
but just that, to expect it also, still in '24 is also probably unreasonable too. So somewhere in there is something reasonable.
I think you're trying to figure out, you're saying put a contingency in 2025. I think the challenge is you're saying, you want to say and you don't know what to fill in the blank with and just yet. And so I think part of it is, what concerns or questions do you have that you would like the chief to answer? Because I think the chief will run back and figure out, he wants to come back very soon. I can assure you of this. I know Chief well enough that he's going to want to come back. So what are those things that you would like to see discussed? Is it,
Coming out of last week, options for a joint facility was what put this all in motion. Is it feasible? Obviously not on that site, but is it feasible within the bounds of, the city of Oshkosh? And what would that roughly entail? Without full plans, there's ways to do that.
And then I had questions on like quality of our existing, and it sounds like you have some of
Yeah,
that,
they do.
that information.
Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, they-
Well, and if I could also propose this, relative to what everybody's talking about. The design work for the training center on Sawyer, for the fire department training center, that project should conclude right at the beginning of January. That they'll have all that work done in January. We do a workshop where he comes and presents out what that would look like and help you understand the scope and why, costs associated with it, things of that nature. That also gives Chief Smith and I an opportunity to discuss what a collaborative joint training center may look like. Start to identify, I need 9 acres, I need 4, whatever that might be, and what our visions are, and try to engage some input on what would that process look like and potentially cost. Because there's other joint training facilities around the country, we can find out the price tag on that and, what it took to build it and things like, we can do, that gives us the opportunity to collaborate as well and have some of those discussions so that, we can give you a more informed landscape in January of, here's option A, B, C, what the price tag will probably be and what that would look like, and also include, this is what 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 would look like, all right? So to kind of pull that all together for some type of workshop mid-January, so that you can have some more informed decision-making. If that's acceptable, we'll work towards that end.
For what it's worth, I'm happy with the January timeline. I think May, June is a bit late, considering the fact that Chief wants to get something started in '25, and I think we all agree that something should get started in '25. I think January is a good time frame for me, at least.
I saw enough head nodding on that one.
Okay.
Sorry, Chris.
I nodded.
I think they got the full picture on that one, too. So if you
Good.
do look back in the future, you're going to
You
see,
know I will.
you're going to see enough head
You know
nodding.
I will.
I had one clarifying question.
Yep.
If I'm putting in a fire department contingency in the facility section of the CIP, what dollar amount am I putting?
I'm fine with a contingency of the original 7.7, quite
Okay.
honestly.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
It gives us the flexibility. It doesn't mean we have to use it if we choose not to. So,
And then I didn't want to double budget at 7.7, so it's
Yep.
like, that. I like that, because then we'll still show the fire training center, we'll just probably put a 0 on it, and just say that's the 7, it's one or the other.
that one's unfunded in '26, quite honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
It's a
It'll show
project.
it'll show as unfunded as in '26, and then,
Yes.
once you guys give us the answer that you choose, then we can go ahead.
Yep.
And I know Chief's going to turn around on this pretty darn quick, so I will put it on my outstanding issues, but don't worry, he won't let me forget about it.
So, anything else for the fire chief? Chief, thank you. Appreciate you being here and helping having this discussion with us.
Thank you all for the discussion and support. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other operational questions, capital improvement related questions? Anything else from Ms. Combs or City Manager Roloff?
I didn't hear council take any action on any additional enhancements, and so where we stand is at 8.1396. Those, because we have a series of resolutions that you'll have to approve next week, approving the levy, improving the tax rate, approving the budget, improving the CIP. So we'll make all these amendments. I mean, basically, not much from tonight, but just confirming that the last line, the last blue line is on that sheet is where you want us to go with. You'll have that before you next Tuesday. Julie,
Yeah,
anything else?
I think that would be it, and then I'll make those changes for the CIP. And then unless there's anything else that council is wanting me to work on, I think that would be it.
I mean, no other messages have been conveyed to me to share. I do want to say to city staff in the back, I want to thank you for going through this process, not only with Ms. Combs and the city manager Roloff, but going through this process with us. It's the most, outside of what we're going to do in a couple weeks, which we very rarely will do, this is the most important thing we do as council members, to set a budget, set the direction for the next year and beyond. And it's important that, it's an important process. And it came out through the discussions last week and obviously in the past as well, but how passionate you are within your spaces and how collaborative you are with each department, and knowing that sometimes, others got to get a little at different times. Sometimes we've got to wait our turn a little bit. It sucks. I'm going to say it really clearly. It sucks that we can't say yes to more, but I think this is a responsible budget. I appreciate all the effort going into it, and look forward to seeing a finished product on Tuesday that has no amendments. So, and I know finance does as well. If there's nothing else, we can wrap up the workshop and consider it closed. All right, workshop's adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great